Okay, so let's talk about configuring SSH access to a Cisco device. Now I'm going to do this on a switch. You'll do the exact same thing on a Cisco router as well. So really no difference in them whatsoever. We're using the same basic network we used before where we just have one standalone switch. And we've already got some configurations on here, some of which are actually going to be needed for this. So I've set my line passwords for both my VTY and my console line, and I've set my privileged exec mode password. Now, the other thing I've done here, and this is going to be necessary, is I've set a host name, and I'm going to need that in order to configure SSH. And remember, SSH is like Telnet access, except it's encrypted, so it's more secure. Now, I can look at my current SSH settings by issuing the command show IP SSH. And it will tell me SSH is disabled. I need to create a crypto key of at least 768 in order to enable SSH version 2. And then it gives me authentication timeout, authentication retrays, etc. Okay, so I want to start configuring the RSA keys, which I'm going to need for SSH. But before I do that, I have to create a domain name. Now, this is the domain name here is just going to be used for the generation of the SSH keys. So it doesn't have to be a registered domain or anything like that. So I'm going to go to config t and IP domain name company.local. And that'll give me the domain name that I need. So now do show run so I can see it from here without exiting. Now I'm going to see a host name and an IP domain name. So I've got a fully qualified domain name for this switch. Now I can generate my keys. So it's crypto key RSA generate. And I just got that backwards and I do that a lot. Crypto key generate RSA. There we go. That's better. All right. So the name for the key will be, and this is why we needed that full thing, primary switch.company.local. We can choose the size from 360 bits to 2048. The bigger it is, the more secure it is, but the slower it runs. Most people aren't going to notice that, however. So the default is 512. Now remember when we did the show IPSSH, it said to run version 2, we have to have at least a 768-bit key. So I'm going to do 1024, provided I can type correctly, 1024 to generate me a longer key. And it generates, very quickly. All right, so that gives me my key. Now what I need to do is I need to enable SSH version 2. So my command is IPSSH version 2 and that will enable version 2 for me. Now the other thing that is going to be a little bit different here is that with SSH I need to use usernames and passwords. And by default on my Cisco devices, we don't have usernames and passwords defined. We do line passwords. So now I need to switch that to using the username and passwords. So my first thing is to create a user. So my command is user, and I'm going to call this user, we'll do access. And then I can set a password for him, and I'm going to set a password of Cisco. Okay, so that creates me a user with a password of Cisco, which is fine. The other thing I can do is I can set different privilege levels. So if I do user admin pass Cisco, now there's one thing here, and that is I'm going to use, this will give me a admin user named Cisco, so now I'm going to be able to tell who logged in. But the other thing I can do, and I've got to do this before the password, is I can set my privilege level to 15. And what that's going to do is that's going to automatically log them in at privileged exec mode. Then I can set my password to Cisco. Now I've got to do it in that order because if I did it this way, user admin pass Cisco PRI 15, my password actually becomes Cisco space PRI space 15. So make sure you do that in the right sequence. All right, let's create another one here. User, and I'm going to create one for myself this time. Privilege 15, and I'm going to use my secret. I'm going to use the same thing because I'm being lazy today, and that'll give it to me as a higher level of encryption. So if I do my do show run, now I'm going to see I have a handful of users. User access, admin, privilege level 1, and here's their password, encrypted with low-level encryption based on our service password encryption. Same thing here, except they're privilege level 15. And then we have my account. Okay, now that sets up my Control C to break out of there. That sets up my users. Now, if I go back, let me do a show run again. Do show run. And go down to my VTY lines. You'll still see that we're set to log in. But that is set to log in using this line password. So what I want to do is I want to do line VTY 015. I'm going to change it to login local, which says login using my local account database instead of just login. In fact, if you do a login question mark, and since we're in Packet Tracer, it doesn't have all of them, we can only use the local account database. But on a physical device, you'll see a couple of other options, like the ability to use Radius login or something like that. Now, the other thing I want to do is I want to make it so we can only use SSH. So don't want to use any telnet. So what we do is we set the transport input to SSH. And now you can only connect to these VTY lines using SSH. If somebody tries to telnet to them, it won't work. Let me end out. I'm going to do a show run. And let's look at our VTY lines. And now you see login local, transport input SSH. So if I do show IP SSH, you're going to see SSH is enabled. We're running version 2. All right, SSH is configured. Now, one more thing I want to go over real quick, and that is this local login. You can do local login without doing SSH. You create the users just like we did above. You do login local, and then you can log in using those specific users. And if you log in using, the admin user or something like that, it'll automatically take you to that higher level. In fact, let's do this real quick just for the fun of it. This is beyond SSH, but we're just playing at the moment. Line con 0 login local, which will tell that to log in using our local account database. Remember, by the way, changes take effect immediately, but in order to have them save, we need to copy, run, start. Otherwise, when the system reboots, it won't do it. Your changes won't be saved. So now it asks me for my username, and I'm going to log in using access with the password of Cisco. It puts me in privileged exec mode. I can still use my privilege, or it puts me in user exec mode. I can still use my privileged exec mode password to gain access to privileged exec mode. But if I log in as admin with my password, notice it takes me there immediately. Okay, so that's it. We have configured SSH on our switch. Remember to do it on a Cisco router. We use exactly this. We do exactly the same thing, exactly the same steps. There's no difference between the two.